I do think that hosts have a responsibility to some extent to help their users who are by nature less security aware than the hosts themselves, be able to stay secure online.
Now, I find myself to be a trustworthy person, but that doesn't mean that, everyone is, and it doesn't mean that everyone is for all time.
What I think is most important for hosts is helping their customers understand what it is that they need and why it is that they need it.
In talking to users and going out and reaching out and actually talking to users, what we found is that a lot of folks just didn't even understand why they would be attacked. Welcome to Impressive Hosting, a podcast about the role hosting plays in shaping the open web. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman. On this show, we go deeper than uptimes, dashboards. We talk about hosting as infrastructure, about ownership, independence, and what it takes to build ethical, high-end WordPress hosting that actually serves creators, businesses, and the internet itself. Before we dive in, head to impressive.host. That's where you can comment on episodes, ask follow-up questions, and help shape future conversations. You'll also find links to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. Today, I'm very happy to have Aaron Campbell, VP of Product at Monarx, joining us today to talk about security. We're going to talk about WordCamp US. We're going to talk about a variety of different things and a little bit about AI, probably a lot about AI and how it's shaping the future of security and how it's affecting WordPress. Aaron, thanks for joining. Tell us a little about what you're working on and where you're from and all that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, I guess where I'm from, I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the U.S. I live in Oklahoma. Enjoy the technical side of work and the open, I guess, outdoor spaces in Oklahoma. But where I'm from professionally, I've been through a lot of things here, from running my own agency and then moving into the hosting space, where I've pretty much found myself digging in deep over the last 15 years. And now at Monarx, where we help hosts fight malware and bad actors and keep their sites, their servers, and their users safe and secure, which is a very interesting and fun problem to be solving in our modern AI-powered days. Keeps me on my toes and gives me fun problems to solve.
Yeah, it's interesting. I appreciate the fact that you went from working with a host to now supporting the host from an outside perspective. Security is always something that's really interesting to me in the way in which we talk to agencies and other end customers about it. I think one thing that always comes up with hosting companies is that there is, a baseline level of security that all hosts should be expected to bring to the table. Then there's the added layers of security that hosts opt in to bring. Sometimes they end up charging customers for it. But, it's an interesting thing because I think most folks at home, especially the most novice of us, think that everything is fully incorporated into every hosting plan that they get. They think that all the security that they're going to need is already built in. So, from your perspective, as someone who used to work for a hosting company and now is working for a security company, where do you think you draw that line? Where do you think hosts are, responsible to secure things, and where do you think the agency or the DIYer is responsible to pick up the slack there?
Right into one of the biggest questions that hosts have been struggling
right,
with.
We might as well just dive into the deep end, right?
So this is a great question, though, Jesse, because I think that this is shifting some in our modern day, but it's still a thing that hosts struggle with lots. Now, to be clear, I do think that hosts have a responsibility to some extent to help their users who are by nature less security aware than the hosts themselves, be able to stay secure online. However, not all users at any given host need the same types of security, level of security. People are running different kinds of sites and applications. Some are selling things, some are not. And so the host does not need to include the same everything bundle for everyone. What I think is most important for hosts is helping their customers understand what it is that they need and why it is that they need it. So I think the biggest thing that hosts need to be doing is everything to keep their own infrastructure secure so that the neighborhood, if you will, that the customer is hosting in is generally secure and clean. And then all the detection, all the awareness, and raising that to the customer in a way that lets the customer know exactly what their risk is and what they can do to solve it. And so that may look like, hey, we don't block all these potential attacks, but what we do is we raise this in your dashboard. You have had this many failed login attempts. We could help throttle those if you would like. If that's not a thing you want, if that's not important to you, you don't need to upgrade to that service. And you can roll that general rule of thumb out across the board.
I really like that. So, when I was working with agencies in the past, a lot of times I'd watch as they would describe the website building process as designing a house. The foundation, the framework of it, very much like the CMS of your choice, the aesthetics, the design of the house, the colors, the fonts, and is equivalent to the fonts and the user interface and the user experience that you choose for your website. But I never really thought about it, that metaphor extending beyond the house and into the neighborhood and into the city. And that's very much the way it works. The infrastructure itself is the cul-de-sac or the city infrastructure provided by the hosting company. And there is a layer of policing, we might say, that is the responsibility of the city to enforce and to make sure that they are, in fact, securing the neighborhood and securing everyone around you. But there's only so much they can do when you start inviting predatory people into your home, right? And this is something that we have always talked about too, right? Like if you're running WordPress and you have the most secure infrastructure, the most secure city, but your passcode on your digital bolt, your deadlock on your home is 0000, or your password to WordPress is admin or something like that. There's only so much a hosting company can do to protect you at that point. So you do have some level of responsibility to that. But it's interesting because I think and this actually came up in the recent documentary that was released by Automatic, the Code for the People. I remember Paolo talking about this, that there's one of the greatest things that happened is that the barrier of entry was removed and lowered to an extent where anyone at any level is able to build a website. But that also means that they don't come getting an education in security. They don't get years of experience understanding how to thwart attacks or block malicious actors, or even just have the basic knowledge of what provides vulnerabilities in their space. So how do we go about educating people in security when it for the most part people are bored by it, they're not interested in it, they're very focused on marketing or getting their website up and running, they're very focused on getting leads or sales. Security is usually a back seat. So how do we get to a place where we're accepting the fact that the barrier of entry is super low, but also understanding the fact that these folks don't have that level of education, they don't necessarily want it.
Yeah. So I think that this is one of the places that hosts really have to look at security as a beneficial add-on service and not as a bundled in, included, just like the servers connected to the internet with a really big pipe kind of base level inclusion. Because by viewing security as this add-on, this thing that makes your hosting better, that can make your package better, that can do these extra better things for you, you then position it that way in all of your customer interactions. And that's what helps build customer awareness. For the longest time, security has been a base level thing included in hosting. However, that was when all the added security, all the extras that needed to be done were done by the agency or the site owner, because there was that higher level of technical understanding. Now, as that level of technical understanding has lowered and the host has to become the expert there to help guide even some agencies, but definitely site owners, they need to view those extra steps that were being done by the end user before as beneficial things and start bringing them in. And that's where I'm talking about, in the same spot in your dashboard where you say, hey, do X, Y, and Z, or buy A, B, and C in order to reach more customers. You should also be saying, hey, these things are things that have you at risk. Hey, we checked, have I been pwned, and your password is terrible, right? And it needs to be changed. These are the risks. We've seen these kinds of things trying to probe your site. You should be updating some of your plugins, whatever it is, raising that in a way that spins it as, we have these services that can take these headaches off your plate and do them for you to keep you secure, or you can do it yourself, like we've been doing all along. And baking it in like that is going to be the only way that I can see that we're really going to raise the awareness to the level that we need. I mean, I can go around and talk on as many stages as people will let me, but I'm only reaching a tiny fraction of what could be done if it was baked in this way.
Yeah, so when you say baked in, are you saying that you think that that's at the hosting level, adding some kind of, must-use plugin or interface, or are you thinking that it should even go into core, that core should take on some more of this?
I think it's at the hosting level. Core does a lot for security, but I think that what Core is meant to give you is a secure structure. What hosting is meant to give you is a secure online presence. And the structure needs to stay secure. Core needs to continue doing what it's doing. Are there a few more things that could maybe land there someday? Yeah, maybe. But hosts, I think, are the biggest place at the moment where they can go above and beyond what they've been doing all along, and in the process, bring awareness to their users of what it is that they're addressing.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the biggest gap is at the moment.
And I think that's interesting because, there's multiple ways in which we can talk about AI and the way in which AI is being used in security. One area, though, that I think is really interesting is the fact that obviously it's an LLM, right? So it's a language model that allows for us to talk to it in the way in which we like to communicate, which means it can also talk back to us in the way in which we communicate. And I think that's something that has been missing from the software space, especially around security, for a very long time. When I worked at Brute Protect, one of the things that we focused on heavily was helping people to understand. And man, was it hard to find ourselves at the intersection of, you're vulnerable and you can be attacked, but also don't be afraid to build a website and be scared. You don't want to create fear in folks. You don't want to use fear tactics to get them to subscribe to something or do something. But at the same time, you want them to understand that they're not just simply, behind a giant wall and fully protected, because they're not. And so, one of the first things that we needed to solve for was helping people to understand why they were even vulnerable. Because in talking to users and going out and reaching out and actually talking to users, what we found is that a lot of folks just didn't even understand why they would be attacked. I run a small little mom and pop shop, or I have a brochure website, or it's just my personal portfolio. Like, why would anyone want to attack that? And the thing, we had to help them understand is that it's not necessarily a targeted attack. It's usually a blanket attack. It's a flat out, let me grab every single new domain that gets registered out there and see what I can do to penetrate that. And most of the time, these botnets are looking to get to the resources behind your website, not necessarily into your actual website. Um, and so, I wonder if AI could play a role in education, in being a real time, like personal assistant inside of the WP admin to assist you as you make decisions throughout your website. So, the moment you install WordPress as a core vanilla product, it's highly secure. But then you start adding extensions, you start changing passwords, you start adding users, right? And there's so many little things that you don't necessarily think about. Like, for example, something we see so commonly is like, hey, I would love your help in fixing my website. This happens at a WordCamp all the time. Like, I might sit down with someone and try to help them. And they're like, okay, so I'll create an admin account for you. And then they forget that they've created an admin account for me. Now, I find myself to be a trustworthy person, but that doesn't mean that, everyone is, and it doesn't mean that everyone is for all time. And so, that little action of creating a new admin user is not necessarily something that they think is scary, or, it creates a vulnerability, but it does. So maybe having a little AI bot that's like, hey, are you sure this person needs to be an admin? Maybe they just need to be an author. Something like that might be a way to leverage AI to help secure a greater part of the internet.
Possibly something that that even helps convey what those risks are to them in very normal words, right? Hey, an admin can do absolutely anything on your site. This person will continue to have access until you remove this account. Um, maybe maybe it says, "Would you like me to remind you tomorrow to remove this account?" Or those kinds of things that
Right.
could potentially be very helpful, because there is like general good maintenance health that end users should be doing. And just, it's not that they won't, they don't understand that they need to, or why. And I do think that there's a barrier. I mean, it's in almost every company I've ever worked in, having been in tech for so long, between sort of the way that the super technical people who build and really understand all this stuff speak, and the way that sort of your average person that's using this at the end of the day speaks.
Right.
And there can be a translation error there. And to your point, I think AI might be able to help with that. We've certainly been playing with that some here at Monarx recently. And a good example of that is in our dark web monitoring product. We when we surface a breach, the jargon around like what's included in it and stuff tends to be very technical, and we use AI to really try to summarize that in a way that an end user can understand. Just a normal person, what does this mean to you, and what was in this data? Um, and I think that that's potentially one of the more exciting ways that that maybe people are kind of not super excited about at the moment, as everybody's looking at AI for coding and all these other big tasks. But I think this translation could really be massively useful going forward.
Yeah, I think so. I think something along the lines that like it speaks at your level, translates things not from two different languages, but from two different levels of language, I think might be actually really, really interesting. And it's funny because you just talked about the dark web monitoring. I would love to dive into that, because when I sit down with folks who I'll give you an example. Like my father-in-law, he's in his 70s. Um, he's a smart guy. He used to work at a major publishing company. But this technological stuff is it's a little bit hard to digest, a little bit hard to understand. And when he gets a notice, it's like, hey, you've been pwned. First of all, that's language that not everyone immediately understands. And second, you can feel the tension, right? Immediately, there's a little bit of adrenaline, there's a little bit of nervousness. And I think when that happens, your brain starts to like immediately constrict and the scope of what you understand gets narrower. And then you have a harder time really digesting what it is that's happening. Um, and so, it's really interesting when you start to help people understand that, hey, your website or your username and password that you use to here is now public. So you should go change that, obviously. But it's not always like, hey, wait a minute, did I use that same username and password in 6 other places? And how would they even know to start doing that? Like I think one thing that they don't understand is the broad sweeping ability of like these hackers to test things 10 trillion times, like to attack 100 million times until they get in, and like to just continually using usernames and passwords over and over and over again. Or if there is a targeted attack, right, to like be able to go and search for your username somewhere else. Um, and so, I think in that moment, like being able to help them understand how this actually relates to your website is interesting. Um, and it's tough too, because the language has to be designed in a way to help them understand it. Like it also doesn't have full access to everything. Like it wouldn't necessarily know that your password in that moment, the one that's currently, hashed and stored, is vulnerable or not. So it's kind of a guessing game. And so you don't always give them the exact details. Like you have to change your username and password. It's more like you may need to change your username and password. So how do you balance that level of urgency with sometimes the vaguer comments and the vaguer statements?
But first, you dig in as deep as you can to get to clarify as much as that of that vagueness as possible, right? So, the may need to change your password. Maybe instead that alert comes up on login where you have actually checked the password and said this is in fact one of those vulnerable passwords because we checked it in flight, not just against our database hash or whatever it is. And and you do need to change your password because of X, Y, Z. Maybe that's not possible, and the may is all you can do. Maybe you do know what breach that was tied to, and you can say, "Hey, your password from your Nike account was compromised. If you use the same password here, you should change it." The way that we're doing it in our dark web monitoring is really giving kind of like 3 to-dos for every breach that someone's seeing. So trying to give them actionable things that they can do that help them think through what's next. And so sometimes the data isn't even a password, right? Maybe it was my address and phone number, and what I need to do is, you know, set up some credit
Oh,
monitoring because that's someone's probably trying to take my identity, those kinds of things. But maybe it's, go everywhere that you use this password and change it. Maybe it's, make sure to cycle the password on your email account because that's, that's a place that this is at risk. Whatever it is, give them concrete steps. The biggest thing, if you have to be vague with the message, make sure that at least the steps that they can do are concrete. So maybe you need, maybe your password was compromised, but to make sure you're safe, click here to change your password. Once that's done, you're good to go. Don't use a password you've used somewhere else, right? Those simple, solid, exact steps can help. To your point, I don't know if is it calm a person down, focus them back in, whatever it is. It can help reduce that sort of stress that you were talking about because they can just say, "Oh, okay, there's a little bit of a scary thing, but if I do this and that, they say the
yeah.
scary thing's taken care of. Done."
I think it goes back to empowerment, right? You want to leverage that urgency that they're feeling into something that they can take action on so that they feel empowered, that they can actually fix the problem and actually address it. So how does someone actually interact with Monarchs? Is it something I mean, I'm familiar with Monarchs, but for the folks at home who may not necessarily be, is it an interface that end users are interacting with directly? Is it passing through the hosting company? Do customers have a direct relationship with Monarchs, or is it all through their host? How does that work?
So we power the security solutions at hosts. So at many of the big hosts, you are using Monarchs, whether you realize it or not, to help keep your site clear of malware, etc. Um, at some of the registrars, you might be using us for dark web monitoring if you've opted into that kind of thing. We do have some direct interaction with the end users in that we supply those hosts with kind of a customer portal that lets a customer see the malware that was found and cleaned and remediated on their site, then attacks that were blocked, the monitorings that are in place, those kinds of things. And in some cases, gives them the ability to um, find more details, take action on some of those kinds of things, etc. We also can, like, everything that we do is fully API first. So some hosts have chosen to essentially build that dashboard themselves into their dashboard, which is great as well, as long as the end user is able to see and know and understand. That's great.
Yeah. So, it's funny because with WP Cloud, we operate the same way. It's 100% API based. The hosting companies outsourcing their infrastructure to us and fully managed WordPress, and we handle performance and security for them as well. But that puts the host brand up front, which is great, I think, for most part. But there is this added complexity, which is that, especially around security, I think the security company's brand is important in developing trust with the end user because they don't only host with one company, right? It's ignorant, I think, for us to think that, an agency or someone else is using one hosting company. And so if these messages are coming through multiple brands, or some hosting companies are not necessarily, taking advantage of the full security solutions that are out there, and some are, um, I wonder if that diffuses the message at all, and whether or not it would actually be better for the ecosystem if there was, um, a larger trusted voice across the entire industry that was educating. Maybe there's an opportunity for Monarchs to live kind of behind the scenes, but also maybe take a larger part in like the WordPress ecosystem education and community, and maybe other security companies should be doing that as well.
I think we're trying to move that way. It is an interesting balance. I think that to your point of like agencies, I think you're 100% right. An agency probably hosts at a number of different hosts, and being able to know that this host or that host is using um, Monarchs and we trust Monarchs, that's great. And so building our Monarchs brand to those people as a trusted security expert that when they know that the host is using us, they know that they're good to go. I think that's important. But also, when you look at the huge number of just end users that are hosting directly with a host, that just go to Bluehost and buy hosting, they only know the Bluehost name. That's the only thing they've interacted with. That's the only thing that they've really built trust with. And they're not aware of any kind of security companies in the space, and probably don't want to be. That they're a leather worker selling their leather goods online that they make. They've just decided they want to own their own space instead of sit on Etsy, right, or whatever it is. And since they trust Bluehost with that, they should be able to buy Bluehost complete security, and that can come with Monarchs, and they never have to know. But they can still be safe with the brand that they do trust. So I do think there's a balance there. There's a number of customers that are only ever going to know the host as the brand they trust. And for those that make sense, I think it's important for us to get out there and be talking to agencies, hosts, etc., putting out a lot of information, white papers and such, which we've been doing recently to help build that trust in our brand.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because I think it kind of leans on the fact that part of the responsibility of a security company like Monarx or WP Cloud even, or others, is that maybe part of our responsibility is around building the narrative around security so that we can help shape the way in which we're educating folks and helping them to understand things. We're almost at time, and I want to continue this conversation, and we have barely scratched the surface of AI. But before we part on this episode and start another one, or come back for another one, quick question: are you going to WordCamp US? And if so, what are you excited about?
Going to WordCamp US. And I'm excited about the same thing I'm always excited about at WordCamp US, which is getting together with all the people and getting the chance to, I don't know, talk about all the things happening in our industry at the moment. Everything from what's affecting hosting, what people are building with the product, what new things are out there, what exciting new projects people have going on. That's always been my favorite part. It's what I'm looking forward to again.
Yeah, very cool.
What about
Yeah.
you? Are you going to be there?
I'm gonna be there. Very excited to go. And I think the energy is going to be great. I think we're going to see a lot of people hanging out inside the expo because it's going to be sweltering outside. But I think inside they know how to keep the room cool. I think we're even going to see people with sweatshirts. But I think that's great because what it means is that there's going to be less of that typical venturing out and taking a break, and more of like, hey, I'm going to hang out in the booths. I'm going to hang out in the expo area. I'm going to hang out with others. And I think it's going to make for a really great, intimate, but large WordCamp. On that note, we're going to take a break and we'll come back with Aaron for another episode in the future. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.